Smaug the Terrible was the last and greatest of the fire drakes of the North to survive into the Third Age, claiming the title of the chiefest and greatest of calamities. He emerged from the Grey Mountains in TA 2770 and descended upon Erebor with such fury that the mountainside itself cracked and split from the heat of his coming. His body stretched nearly 150 feet in length, covered in scales like overlapping steel plates that no normal weapon could pierce, with only his belly showing any vulnerability where he had pressed gems and gold into his flesh over centuries of sleeping on treasure. The fire he breathed was not ordinary flame, but dragon fire of such intensity that it could melt the rings of power themselves, save only the one ring, and reduce entire cities to ash and slag in minutes. His intelligence matched his physical might, possessing knowledge accumulated over centuries and the ability to cast hypnotic spells with his voice and gaze, bending weaker minds to his will or freezing them in terror. When he took Erebor, he slaughtered thousands of dwarves and men in a single day, destroying the entire kingdom of Dale as an afterthought, demonstrating that entire civilizations were merely inconveniences to him. His senses were so acute that he could detect the removal of a single golden cup from his vast hoard while sleeping, and could smell the difference between dwarf, man, and hobbit from the faintest trace of scent. The desolation he created around the Lonely Mountain persisted for nearly 2 centuries, with the land remaining barren and poisoned by his mere presence, earning the region the name Desolation of Smaug. He possessed the dragon spell, an enchantment that grew stronger with age, allowing him to bewitch those who looked upon him or heard his voice, making them reveal their deepest secrets or become paralyzed with dragon fear. His wings could create winds strong enough to topple buildings when he flew, and his tail was a weapon in itself, capable of smashing through stone walls and crushing dozens of warriors in a single sweep. During his attack on Lake Town, he demonstrated tactical brilliance by setting the lake itself on fire, using the wooden buildings and docks as fuel to create an inescapable inferno. Even in death, his blood was poisonous, and his bones were prized for their magical properties, while his hoard carried a curse that brought madness and greed to those who claimed it. The wealth Smaug accumulated wasn't random but carefully selected, as he could sense the history and power in objects, keeping items of significance while discarding others, regardless of monetary value. His knowledge encompassed ancient history, languages, and riddles, having learned much during his centuries of life, and from the treasures he studied in his hoard. The heat of his body was so intense that he left molten footprints in stone, and the air around him shimmered like a desert mirage even when he was at rest. His voice carried a hypnotic quality that grew stronger the longer one listened, which is why Bilbo's conversations with him became increasingly dangerous as they progressed. The dragon sickness that affected those who coveted his treasure was partially caused by microscopic scales he shed, which carried a psychic poison that amplified greed and paranoia. Glauring the Golden was the first of the fire drakes and the father of all dragons, bred by Morgoth in the depths of Angband through dark sorcery and corruption. Unlike his offspring who developed naturally, Glauring was personally shaped by Morgoth's will, making him not just a beast but a conscious weapon of malice with intelligence that rivaled the wisest of elves. He emerged prematurely from Angband in his youth and was driven back by mounted archers, teaching Morgoth to keep him hidden until he reached full size and power. By the time of his maturity, Glauring had grown to such might that he led the vanguard in the Battle of Sudden Flame, breaking the siege of Angband single-handedly by creating a river of fire that consumed everything in its path. His power over minds exceeded even Smaug's, as demonstrated when he held Turin and Nienor in his spell, erasing memories, implanting false thoughts, and weaving destinies of tragedy that would unfold exactly as he foresaw. The title Father of Dragons was not merely genealogical but magical, as Glauring possessed abilities that later dragons lost, including the power to take on different forms and to project his consciousness across vast distances. During the sack of Nargothrond, he paralyzed Turin with nothing but his gaze and words, forcing him to watch as Finduilas was dragged away to torment, demonstrating cruelty that was calculated and personal rather than bestial. His eyes were described as windows into the void itself, containing not just malice but the active will of Morgoth, making those who looked into them see their own doom reflected back. He could not be harmed by any weapon while conscious, as his will alone could turn aside blades and arrows, requiring either stealth or overwhelming force to wound him. When he crossed Beleriand, he left trenches in the earth that became permanent geographical features, and his breath poisoned rivers so thoroughly that they remained toxic for decades. His death came only through Turin's black sword Gurthang, forged from meteoric iron, striking from beneath while Glauring crossed the ravines of Capan. Glauring's creation involved the corruption of sacred fire itself, as Morgoth perverted the flame imperishable that Iluvatar alone possessed, creating instead a consuming hunger that destroyed rather than created. His growth was accelerated through feeding on the life force of captured elves, each consumed soul adding to his size and malevolence, which explained his unusual intelligence and ability to understand the deepest fears of the Firstborn. The dragon's body was a fortress unto itself, with scales that weren't merely armor but active defenses that could sense approaching threats and shift to deflect blows before they landed. His blood was liquid flame that burned hotter than any forge, capable of melting through stone and metal alike, making even wounding him dangerous to attackers. During the destruction of Beleriand, Glauring demonstrated the ability to command lesser dragons through thought alone, coordinating attacks across hundreds of miles as if the entire dragon host shared a single mind. The curse he laid upon Turin wasn't simple magic, but a manipulation of fate itself, twisting the threads of destiny that the Valar had woven, showing his power extended into metaphysical realms. His presence alone could wither plant life for miles around, not through heat, but through a spiritual poison that drained the will to live from all growing things. The bridge at Nargothrond that he used as his bed became fused into a single piece of stone from the heat and pressure of his body, creating an inadvertent monument to his power that lasted long after his death. When he spoke, his voice carried harmonics that bypassed the ears and spoke directly to the mind, making it impossible to ignore or misunderstand his words, regardless of language barriers. The treasure hoard he gathered at Nargothrond was arranged in specific patterns that amplified his power, using the golden gems as a magical battery that made him stronger the longer he remained there. Gothmog was the High Captain of Angband and Lord of the Balrogs, the most powerful of Morgoth's servants after Sauron himself. As a Maya who had been corrupted in the beginning of days, Gothmog possessed power that exceeded any earthly creature, wielding weapons of flame and shadow that could cleave through enchanted armor and shields. He personally slew Feanor, the mightiest of all elves, surrounding him with other Balrogs and dealing the mortal wounds that even the creator of the Silmarils could not withstand. During the Nirnaeth Arnoediad, the Battle of Unnumbered Tears, Gothmog led the host of Angband and personally killed Fingon, High King of the Noldor, first binding him with his whip of flame, then crushing him beneath his black axe. His tactical brilliance matched his physical might as he commanded not just Balrogs but dragons, armies of orcs, and other creatures of darkness with strategic genius that turned potential defeats into crushing victories. The fear he inspired was so great that entire battalions of elves and men would break and flee at the sight of him approaching, wreathed in darkness and flame that consumed everything nearby. He stood taller than the tallest elf, with a form that constantly shifted between shadow and substance, making him difficult to strike even for those brave enough to face him. His whip could extend to impossible lengths, binding victims from great distances, while his axe was said to have been forged in the heart of Angband from metals that existed nowhere else in Arda. During the fall of Gondolin, Gothmog led the final assault, breaking through gates that had stood for centuries and bringing down the hidden city that was considered impregnable. In that battle, he met his end at the hands of Ecthelion of the Fountain, who drove his spike-helmeted head into Gothmog's body as they both fell into the Fountain of the King, where the waters extinguished the Balrog's flames forever. The mutual destruction of Gothmog and Ecthelion became legendary, as it took one of the greatest elf lords sacrificing himself to destroy Morgoth's most terrible captain. His death marked a turning point in Morgoth's power, as no other Balrog ever arose to take his place as High Captain, and the organization of Angband's forces never recovered the same strategic cohesion. Feanor was the mightiest of all the children of Iluvatar in craft, lore, and native power, surpassing every elf who came before or after him. His mother Miriel gave so much of her strength to his creation that she died of weariness after his birth, making him unique among all elves as one whose birth demanded such sacrifice. He created the Silmarils, the greatest works ever crafted by any incarnate being, capturing the light of the two trees in imperishable crystals that even the Valar marveled at, and Morgoth lusted after above all treasures. His skill extended beyond jewelcraft to include the invention of the Tengwar script, improvements to the Serati of Rumil, and countless other works of art and knowledge that advanced Elvish civilization immeasurably. The Palantiri, the seeing stones that would later prove crucial in Middle-earth's history, were quite possibly his creation, demonstrating his ability to imbue crystal with powers of sight that transcended space and time. His spirit burned so fiercely that his body could barely contain it, giving him energy and passion that made other elves seem dim by comparison, driving him to achievements in decades that others could not accomplish in millennia. When he drew his sword against Fingolfin, the Valar themselves intervened through Manwë's herald, showing that his wrath was considered dangerous enough to warrant divine intervention. During the flight of the Noldor, he led his people through the Helcaraxes grinding ice despite the doom of Mandos, his will alone keeping thousands moving through conditions that should have destroyed them. In his final battle, he fought multiple Balrogs simultaneously for days, killing several before Gothmog arrived with reinforcements, a feat unmatched by any other elf in history. His death was unlike any other, as his spirit burned so hot that it reduced his body to ash instantly, and Mandos confirmed he would never be reincarnated while Arda endured, keeping him in the halls until the end of time. The oath of Feanor that he swore with his sons became a force of destiny itself, driving events throughout the First Age and causing more tragedy than any other words ever spoken. Even the Valar could not unmake what Feanor had wrought, as the Silmarils remained beyond their power to recreate or destroy, marking him as a creator whose works transcended even divine ability to replicate. Glorfindel was among the most powerful elves to ever exist, unique in being the only known elf to return from death with enhanced power comparable to a Maya. In his first life, he was a lord of Gondolin and chief of the House of the Golden Flower, already mighty enough to stand against demons of shadow and flame. During the fall of Gondolin, he fought a Balrog in single combat on the narrow mountain pass of Cirith-Thorenath, killing the demon but falling to his death, sacrificing himself to save the refugees, including Arundel's parents. His sacrifice was deemed so noble that Mandos released his spirit after a brief time, and the Valar not only restored his body but enhanced his native power to near Maya levels. When he returned to Middle-earth in the Second Age, he brought with him authority from Valinor itself, making him one of the few beings Sauron genuinely feared to face directly. His spiritual power was so great that he existed simultaneously in both the seen and unseen worlds, appearing to Frodo's eyes at the Ford of Bruin as a figure of white light that drove back the Nazgul. The Witch King of Angmar, Lord of the Nine, fled rather than face Glorfindel in single combat at the Battle of Fornost, recognizing an enemy who could destroy him permanently. His prophecy that not by the hand of man will he fall demonstrated foresight granted by his time in Valinor, seeing centuries into the future with clarity that exceeded even Elrond's wisdom. During the Third Age, he could ride openly against all 9 Nazgul together, his presence alone enough to scatter them, as beings of shadow could not endure the light that emanated from his enhanced spirit. His horse Asphaloth was likewise touched by his power, running faster than any normal steed and showing no fear of the ringwraiths that terrified all other animals. The authority he carried from the Valar made him effectively their representative in Middle-earth, similar to the Istari but without their limitations, retaining full memory and power from his time in the Blessed Realm. Even Gandalf deferred to Glorfindel's judgment in matters of spiritual danger, recognizing him as an equal or possibly superior in pure power, though Gandalf held greater responsibility for Middle-earth's fate.